I'm Dame Stephanie Shirley. I'm a venture philanthropist and author of 2 books. Today on the show, we'll speak about building a technology company for women in the 1960s, which pioneered remote working long before we had a pandemic. I'm going to talk about why I gave away 100 million to change how we view autism and to research the social and ethical impact of the internet. And lastly, confronting my own depression and the dangers of ignoring your mental health for an entrepreneur.
Congratulations! You are tuned into Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Show, the #1 podcast for Fortune 500 executives and those who are dedicated to creating a quantum leap in leadership. Your host, Dov Baron. He's an executive mentor to leaders like you, a contributing writer for Entrepreneur Magazine, CEO World, and he's been featured on CNN, Fox, CBS, and many other notable sites. Dov Baron is an international business speaker who was named by Inc. magazine as one of the top 100 leadership speakers to hire. Now, over to Dov Baron.
Welcome, dear friends, fans, and fellow aficionados of leadership excellence. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Leadership and Loyalty Tips for Executives. We talk a lot about resilience, but so few of us really know what resilience is. Imagine being stripped away from your birth family due to circumstances of war. Now imagine being shipped off to a country with a completely different language and having to live with complete strangers. Okay, that's tough, right? I think you'd agree with that. Now imagine later on in your life entering into what at the time is a kind of fledgling industry that wants nothing to do with you because it's a men's club and you're clearly not a man. Now imagine taking all that on the chin to become a technology icon who started a software business employing only women in the 1960s. Well, stay tuned because that's where we're going over the next 2 episodes as we sit down with technology icon and true champion of women and technology and of the autistic and leadership since the 1960s, Dame Stephanie Shirley. As always, we need your help in staying relevant, so please get yourself over to wherever you tune into this podcast and do us a favor, will you please? Rate, review, and subscribe to the show. Every subscription, every rating, every one of those things helps us to stay relevant. So we do help. We do appreciate your help with that. And if you are a regular listener, big thank you to you for making us the #1 podcast globally for Fortune 500 listeners. And we are honored and grateful to be cited by Inc.com as the #1 podcast to make you a better leader. By the way, I know you're curious. I'm Dov Baron, and I'm your host, and I'm here to assist you tapping into the one thing in your business that changes everything by transforming meaning into action. Curious to know more? Simply go to dovbaron.com. That's DOVBARON.com. All right, let's strip it down and dive right in. In contemporary times, we hear a lot of talk about those at the forefront of technology. Research shows that in the last 21 years, the number of female software engineers has only increased by 2%, just 2% in 21 years. Despite national conversations about gender diversity in technology, the numbers show that women are still underrepresented, underpaid, and often discriminated against in the technology industry. Although the statistics are trending upwards, which is good, women still feel less enthusiastic about their senior leadership prospects than men. A Pew report found that 54% of men said that they felt it was likely that they would be promoted into an executive management position in their company. Meanwhile, only 25% of women said the same. The question is, are we in leadership still undervaluing women? Well, what if we had the opportunity to sit down and take guidance from a leader, someone who is an icon in the technology world, someone who shattered the glass ceiling, maybe even shattered the concrete ceiling for herself and for women since the 1960s. Well, that's where we're going, and that's just a taste of what we're going to be talking about in the next 2 episodes, because our guest for the next 2 episodes is Dame Stephanie Shirley, or also known as Dame Steve Shirley. I'll explain that later. In 1962, she founded an all-women software company that pioneered remote working. Yeah, in 1960s, not in a pandemic. In the 1960s, she pioneered a company that did remote working, redefined the expectations and opportunities for working women at that time. Her company, Freelance Programmers, grew to 8,500 employees and ultimately valued at almost $3 billion, and she made almost 70 people. She made 70 people inside of her organization millionaires in the process. Since retiring, she has been focused on philanthropy, especially in autism and IT. Over the last 30 years, Dame Stephanie has given away almost 70 million to good causes, primarily in the fields of autism and IT. She is a workplace revolutionary, successful IT entrepreneur turned ardent venture philanthropist. She is the first person to drop off Time's richest list, having given away too much of her money. Not a bad achievement. This is one that she's very proud of. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together and help me to welcome the incomparable, the award-winning champion of women, technology, and autism, Dame Stephanie Shirley.
You embarrass me no end. I'm a quiet English woman who's understated in everything that I do.
Yeah, well, I'm a Brit, as you know, and I got over it. I am so honored to have you here. Thank you so much. It really is a pleasure, and I'm genuinely been looking forward to this. I mean, you, as I said, you're an icon.
And why I think I survived when others haven't during difficult times, because I do have a style of management that's been described as an iron fist in a velvet glove.
Very nice. Very nice. Now, when you talk about kinda, that is often juxtaposed to the old school thinking of, you know, I don't care what's going on in your life, get on with it, do the job. And I think that that's very much what women have brought, is this understanding of kindness and the need for kindness, but a deep sense of compassion and caring. And I think that women bring that in a way that oftentimes men are conditioned away from.
And I think you need to know enough about your colleagues' personal life to know when they're under stress at home as well as in the office, to know when they how they exhibit stress and how they respond to stress. Some people work very well under stress. Most of us don't. We really lose innovation and we lose accuracy.
Now, one of the things that you spoke about in both of your books, Let It Go and So to Speak, both fabulous books that I highly recommend to those who are watching and listening. Both fantastic books. One of the things you talked about in both books was, you know, you talked about your journey, as I said, leaving during the Second World War to come to the UK as a small child. One of the things you spoke a lot about was deciding to make your life a life worth saving, because of course a lot of children were not saved. Talk to us about that decision. When did you come to that decision? When did that become a central for you?
My whole refugee experience has actually driven my life and is as alive in me today, the person that you see, as it was 80 years ago. It really made an enormous impact because I was going to a new country, a new family, a new food, new language, new everything really. And that has given me that resilience that you spoke about earlier, and the ability to cope with change. Having dealt with that, nothing much throws me. And that is useful in the digital world.
Absolutely.
But what happened when I got to England, there was that well-meaning adults were saying to me things such as, and I quote, aren't you lucky to be saved? Aren't you lucky to be saved? And that's not a healthy thing to be saying to a 5, 6, 7-year-old.
Terrible.
But it did have the result that I became determined to make sure that the life that I led was worthy of being saved. And that makes me a bit of a prig, but that's how I am, that's who I am.
Tell I'm very driven by meaning. So tell me what you mean by that. What does that mean for you when you say a life worth saving? What does that actually mean for you?
Well, once or twice I've been asked, do I have a motto in life? And the fact is I don't. If I had one, it would be think for yourself, because I'm a great intellectual, think for yourself, but not of yourself. And that has guided me for many, many decades, and to lead a life that has some worth and is indeed worthy.
So think for yourself, but not about yourself. So again, this is a contradiction for a lot of people because, I actually just delivered last week a presentation called Centered Self-Servant Leader, right? And it's, instead of being a self-centered, being centered self, which is thinking of yourself, filling yourself up in order to bring it to others so you can actually.
I don't think I could have succeeded had I thought in a different way. I have a very gentle management style, always have. I really look after my staff. I value them. I trust them. And trust is something interesting in that the more you trust people, the more trustworthy they become.
Yes. So trusting generates trust.
Yes.
Yeah, that's fabulous. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that at the foundation of great leadership is great caring, great compassion, great kindness.
When you start thinking in terms of a group that has a mission, a group that is understands that mission and can work towards it, that begins to make an environment in which good things happen. And business is not all easy. Well, most of it isn't easy at all. But when I say good things, I mean that people might rise to the occasion when times are tough. You need to have that sort of relationship with your staff that they will not let you down. One of the first executive chairman of a large corporate that I met years ago, and I could not understand how he could lead this organization because he had very little personality. He spoke quietly and unaffectedly. He didn't seem to have any brilliant ideas. How does this guy do? Now you eventually realize he has surrounded himself with people who are much, much smarter than he is. And he trusts them and they trust him. And he's a very nice man and they make sure that he doesn't make the big mistakes. And I thought, well, that's one definition of leadership that I hadn't come across before, but it works.
Yeah. Again, it's surrounding yourself with those you trust, but also by building that trust, as you said, that trust delivers trust, right? So that's really cool. When you think about
one of the things I look at when I'm recruiting as well,
yes.
Could I trust this person? Especially when you've got things like a company policy of working from home, when you can't see people, you haven't got Zoom in the 1960s. Can you actually trust them when you can't see that they're present at their work? And we did trust each other. We're just about to celebrate a 60th anniversary, and the company still sort of holds together to a certain extent, although it's been taken over twice.
Wow. So let's go back, because like I said, you've got this refugee situation, you don't speak the language, the food is foreign. Talk to us a little bit about that journey. So what was that like coming into that new world for you?
I was petrified.
I'm sure.
I was frightened. I was hysterical. I was physically sick. And my foster parents, who were absolutely marvelous, and I looked after them when they were old, they were really very, very accepting, but they didn't speak a word of German, and I didn't speak a word of English. My father, who was a somewhat impractical man, had taught my sister, who was older than I, she was 9 years old, he taught her a few useful words of English so that she could say things such as slow combustion stove, which is not terribly useful for.
I was going to say, where do you use that when you're 9? I think I'll take a slow combustion.
They're more important in Germany, perhaps, than here. And Vine screen Viper. But again, not useful things like how to ask to go to the bathroom. So it was a difficult start. I was with my elder sister, and I clutched her hand throughout the whole of the 2.5-day journey because I was scared of losing her, I suppose.
Of course.
Because we were on a train of about 1,000 children with literally just 2 adults. Now, when I look at a 5-year-old and realize how small and how innocent and how vulnerable they are, I am astonished that I made it. And I'm sure it was because I was with my sister. The children that were allowed out of Germany and the rest of Nazi Europe were aged between 5 and 16. But most of the ones that came out were actually older. And I think it was only when somebody like my sister and I were together, and so she was 9, she was well qualified. I was at the bottom of the range, but I know I was the youngest, but one on the train, because anyway, it doesn't matter why I know, but I do.
Do you remember any of that journey?
Dov, I remember all the childish things.
Of course.
Losing my doll, rather than the losing of a home. Remember the little boy that was sick on the journey all the time. I remember sleeping on sheets of corrugated cardboard. I hope you call them the same thing in the States. Yep. Sheets of corrugated cardboard on the floor, on the benches, and believe it or not, in the overhead luggage racks. It was a horrendous journey. It was well organized. We all had numbers around our necks, big labels, giving us a number so that we would get to the right foster parents with it. If we got lost, somebody would know who we are, because there was quite a mixture of children and languages. It was a nightmarish journey, but compared with other refugees that you look at the pictures today from Ukraine and elsewhere, I had it easy. It was organized, it was structured. It was not, we were fed, we were watered, somebody was looking after us, we did get to the right place. So we had it easy. It was before the war broke out.
Right.
And it was initiated and run by the religious groups, Christian and Jewish organizations. The Quaker Society of Friends kept it going when it ran out of money. And there were masses of volunteers, apparently, masses of volunteers who actually administered that largest ever recorded migration of children.
Wow, that's amazing. So you've gone from that to becoming a dame. You know, so you're a quote foreigner who now speaks beautifully, whose eloquence and vocal tonality is highly admirable. So you go from being this kid whose sister can say windscreen wipers in German and in English, and you can't say a word of English, to now you're this beautifully spoken, beautifully articulate woman who becomes a dame. Tell us a little bit about becoming a dame, because that seems kind of surreal.
Well, you're very kind of. It is a way of the nation recognizing performance in the national honor. So I was first of all given a lower award, and then in the year 2000, I was one of several high-tech dames and knights who were selected, I think, because it was the millennium, and millennium has this sort of connotation of being very high tech and something new and ambitious. It doesn't really do anything, except in England, you have a better chance of getting a good table at the restaurant if you book under the name.
Next to Dame Judi Dench.
Something like that.
Yeah, right.
But since then, I've been honored with a further honor called the Companion of Honor, which is only given to 65 people worldwide, 45 in the UK. And that is great pleasure, because it never occurred to me that having been made a dame, that there was anything higher that one could achieve, could aspire to.
Wow, that is amazing. That is amazing. So when you now, I guess what I'm asking you is, when you look back, is it surreal? Is it surreal that this kid arrives from Germany in the Kindertransport, doesn't speak the language, and then becomes, pretty much rather what?
But it all happened very incremental,
Of course.
and as happens, as is needed very much in commerce and industry, most of it relies on hard work, dedication, focus, persistence, resilience, all the goodly things that we aspire to. Some of it is luck, some of it is just good fortune, that something happens at the right time. I think entrepreneurs have the reputation of getting their timing right, which is one of the big things in business.
Yes.
And of course, if they're not right, we don't survive. So you only hear of the successful entrepreneurs, and you only hear of our successes, whereas most of us have had many, many failures along the route.
Yeah, I think that timing is very important. But as you said, I mean, I think that people don't count up the failures. The entrepreneur does, but people looking on don't. And as you said, there's this overnight success nonsense that takes 20 years. I'm still not an overnight success, and I've been at it 37 years. And I think, I wonder when it's going to happen, when I'm going to become an overnight success.
I'm sure it's just round the corner. Fear not. Be positive. Think positive.
Thank you. I appreciate that. When you look at women in entrepreneurship today, I want to talk more about that in the second part of the show. But when you look at that today, what is the central message you'd like to send to women? When women, particularly in technology.
I think it's the same message that I would give to men of any ambition and quality, that find something that you really, really, really enjoy doing. Get trained in it, get more trained so that you're really at the leading edge, and then just take a risk. If it fails, you can always try something else, but take a risk and make it happen.
Do you think that your journey as a child is what gave you that resilience around risk?
I'm sure. Yeah. Because it certainly isn't. My family was academic and unambitious, really. They succeeded, but very different. So I think it's the making of a person. As is true, all of us are really formed by our early years in life,
Absolutely.
whether they're good or bad.
Absolutely. So how old were you when you sort of recognized your own entrepreneurial spirit?
Started, I suppose, mid-20s. I was
really
rejecting the world as I found it and wanted to do something about it. I started my company when I was 29, and that was after several years realizing that women just didn't have the opportunities or the environment in which we could succeed easily, and determined to set up a company that was the sort of company I would like to work with, and I guessed a lot of other women would like to work with, and made it happen over a painful period, but it did happen, an all-women's company that succeeded. And we were a wonderful model for diversity, of course.
Well, I want to talk more about that in part 2 of the show. You are a truly fascinating individual, and I really appreciate you taking the time to be with us. For you, dear listener, we're coming towards the end of part 1 of the show. We, of course, we're going to be back in part 2, just one click away. Before we go anywhere, we want to know, Dame Stephanie Shirley, where can we find out more about you, about your organizations, about, you know, whatever it is that you do, and how people can tap into the resources and, of course, find the books?
Well, you can buy the books from my website, which is nice and simple, Steve at steveshirley, one word, .com.
So steveshirley.com.
Steveshirley.com. And we're on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook. You have to find your own way there. I can't do it.
Well, it's okay, because we'll make sure that we post the links to all of those in the show notes, so people can get a hold of those. And of course, you can get the books on Amazon and all those places. Again, one of the books is called Let It Go, and the other one is So to Speak, which is great books. There you go. Fabulous books. Really intriguing journey.
This one was shortlisted for a design award. I'm very proud of it. But the fact is, it doesn't sell as well as the paperback.
No, of course. But it is beautiful. They're both fabulous books. I encourage you to reach out and get them. Again, we're going to be back in just one click with part 2 of our delicious conversation with Dame Stephanie Shirley, otherwise known as Dame Steve Shirley. But we'll get into that when we come back in part 2. Stay curious, my friends. Stay curious.